I have found a way to reconcile the difference between the flood stories of antiquity, and I'm just going to grab two of them. The one from the original creation story that we are familiar with, the Aluma Elish, and of course Genesis. They're very big stories. Anyway, yeah, they look like they've been borrowed, or maybe they prove the same thing. Somehow people work on what those are. And I'm a spiritual seeker. I look for the truth. I'm not a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or anything, but I will study them all. I want to know what they have. And in the process of doing that, I have found a pattern that everybody knows about. The patterns are actually very numerous. I'm not even going to go into them. We just know that between religions and between spiritual teachings, we see a lot of similarities and crossover, and it looks a lot of times like, boy, there's something borrowed or taken, or somehow, some way we see connections there and similarities. And I looked and I looked and I looked at those, and I became obsessed with it. And what I found was that not only are those similarities actually there, those are just the easy ones to see, that actually they're all containing the same thing, but they're not easy to see. The patterns that repeat are at a deeper level. Now, let me set this up first. These stories are complex, very complex. Imagine that we're there 3,000 years ago, and what is life like? Technology or anything. We don't have anything. We don't. We have stories. We're smart people. We have good brains. We have no way to, we can't read, we can't write. And we have stories. And these stories are not just simple stories. We're not a simple, stupid people. We're very wise. We're very complicated, but we haven't developed technology yet. I can almost looking at these stories and treating them as face value, almost like if, I know it's not a fair comparison, but if I were to think 2,000 years in the future, if somebody from there found, one of our smartphones or something like that and said, oh, look how nice this is. These guys were able to call each other up and talk to each other on these phones. Isn't that wonderful? They would never understand what we're getting out of them. The stories are deeper than what we see. And I want to put that out up front because there's something else going on in here that I don't think many people have heard of it or thought about it. Although, honestly, it is very ensconced. It is established. This is a very well-known process, or was at one point in time. If you are a spiritual seeker or somebody that just kind of explores that stuff, and you've been a fan of Joseph Campbell and the hero with 1,000 faces, that's it right there. This flood is going to be a step, one of the steps on the hero's journey. And this is theory, okay? But I want to show you something. I think I can show you something that is so repetitive that if we were passing stories around and using this nesting process, we could send messages to each other and people wouldn't know what was in there if they didn't know this process. And that'll unfold as we go. Here's how it works. And I won't get into the hero's journey, but here's how the decoding process works. You take the story and you grab it and make all of the elements of the story live out inside of you, your carnal mind, your conscious mind, your soul, your spirit, your mind. It lives out inside of you. It is a weird, strange, outward sounding thing, but all of it belongs inside your imagination. And all of the component parts in there are analogs. They're meant to carry a meaning. In a very short, quick example of that, let me just tell you it's a verbal thing, and it's like fables or other sorts of verbal processing techniques. Let's just look at this for a second. I'm gonna just say a verse here. I could say something like, you cycle around that which you cling to. And somebody might just think, well, yeah, that's a funny thing. If I'm holding on to something, I can't let go of it, right? I mean, that could be you're holding on to a pole, or you're holding on to a bad relationship or something like that. It could mean those things. But this is the part where you grab the verse and you make it the component parts of inside of here. You're hanging on, and this one's very simple. There's no component parts. In this case, though, you're hanging on to something that is in your psyche. It is in your memory. It is in your past. It is in your soul. It is something that you don't want out. It is a skeleton in the closet, a weed in the garden, those sorts of things that you feel shame, hurt, pain, whatever. You don't want to let that stuff out, or if it comes out, it's angry, it's something like that. All of those fit into that category. And then because I use the term cycle around that, what that implies in the verse then is that if you're holding on to a pain or a shame or a hurt or something like that, that your life is going to continue to somehow, that's going to keep getting triggered and cycling around. So that is how the verses work, how I'm going to treat the verses all throughout here. This was prompted by a friend of mine asking me a question on another video, and I had made a comment in there that none of the flood stories from antiquity were literal. And he asked me if I could, just provide my thoughts on that. And I thought, yeah, this is a good opportunity to break into that. I don't believe they're literal, but I believe that they could be explained and that they do have a purpose. I'm also going to forewarn you that this is not going to be religious. It is not going to contain any supernatural components. It's not going to contain any point in time where I say, just take my word for it. It is going to be simply showing you this process and saying, do you see it? Is this what they were doing? I think so. It's right there. It's visible. I would also encourage you at all point in times, if you're listening to me do this, if you have an interest in this, to question my objectivity. I do it all the time. I don't want to find baloney. I want to find what's there. And, there are times it's not going to look like I have objectivity because I've been doing this for so long now and you're hearing it for the first time. I already know what they're getting to. So let me just go right there. What they're going to be teaching is this, that as the human is born, we're an empty slate. Depending on how you were raised, whether you were raised in a very nice home or you're raised in that animal place of, being treated like crap and molested and hurt and beaten and all those sorts of things. Depending on how you were raised, you become a product of that. This teaching is for the people who have been hurt that way, how to heal, how to find a way out of that. And that in doing that, it changes the way you experience life. Now, every part of this process is really critical, and establishing how the story fits into our mind is absolutely, this is the puzzle part of it, how that works, how the analogs work. And let's talk about that for a second. We have a conscious mind and we have our soul, spirit, mind, whatever. We're trying to interact with something to make ourselves heal. We want to heal our heart. How do we do that? We have to fix our thinking to heal our heart, okay? So let's just make sure we keep that in mind, that we're not trying to heal our heart. We're trying to figure out how to make ourselves feel better. So in order to interact with these verses, we have to go to where the problem is, and that's in our thinking, not in our feeling. The feeling is the result of the thinking. The thinking is where the problem resides. We have to go there. Okay, and on the hero's journey, there's a selection process and then a doorway, some kind of a gate or something that you have to enter. And that's where we are right now. So I can, this is probably where a lot of people have cut off right now. Whoever goes beyond here you're different. Okay. The conscious mind is what decides what is good or bad. It's your reasoning. It is your eventual reasoning and evaluating of life experiences that makes you decide whether you like something or you don't like something. That includes everything. Think of your entire life, all the things you love, all the things you hate, all of it has been put into your subconscious. So your conscious has trained your subconscious. You could also say back then, they couldn't use those terms. They might say something like, the husband, it's a superior subordinate situation. The husband tells the wife what to do, or the father teaches the son. They're starting to begin to use analogs to describe these inner processes right here. Along with those analogs, let's say you have a husband and a wife that have been married, your conscious and your subconscious. But now, as life has gone on, you've picked up a bunch of things that you don't want anymore, and you've become divided. There has been a divorce. You have got issues now. And what has happened in the marriage is that the conscious and the subconscious have created issues or have decided upon issues that now reside inside of you that become offspring, sick offspring, ill offspring. is one way that it can be described. Or weeds in your garden, demons that possess you. There are many ways to analogously describe this process of you got issues up here and they're residing up here. And again, they're doing this thousands of years ago. I'm kind of forcing their terminology to fit with what our knowledge is today. They're teaching it in much more mysterious ways, and they're also purposefully nesting it into these stories deep. And honestly, this is the one that shows up everywhere, this one teaching everywhere. And by that, I mean the path to spiritual inner healing. The flood story, they don't show up everywhere, but inner cleansing is everywhere. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the Aluma Elish. I just wanted to start by setting that up to begin with because it's going to sound a little bit weird. You go into it and you think, what? Yeah, okay, so if everybody's on board, yeah, let's jump into it. Let's start by looking at what is a flood to them. Again, we go back 3,500 years. We're living in, the earliest times. We are in Sumer. We are near, the Tigris, the Euphrates, that annually there's going to be floods. But between floods, there's a very fertile plain. That's why we live there. We live along the river. Cities and between cities, people are living along the rivers or, back away from the floodplain, but right there. And yeah. Okay. And we're on foot or maybe some animals, but by and large, we are on foot and we're carrying things by hand. And out on that floodplain, between the floods, we're going to be dumping all of our garbage as we're moving along, but it's all going to be organic, probably some broken pottery and things like that, but dead animals, human waste, things like that. It would probably at some point in time on a hot day could activate your gag reflex depending on where you were. I can see that as being a very nasty thing. And that's ugly. That's horrible. Floods come through. After the floods, it all clears out. You look and it's like, wow, it all got washed away. Look at that. It's all fresh again. Boy, that's a wonderful analogy. Let's take that and go. Now we go into the Aluma Elish, and I am not going to detail this or the flood story in Genesis very much. Let's just overview it because I think we all have a good enough idea. There are also a lot of details in there that we shouldn't go after right away. Like I said, they're deep. Let's just take a look at the overview at first. So in the Aluma Elish, what we have is a male and a female god. Remember, those go inside. Male and female god. You are the male god and your other part of you is the female god. Now, in the story, what eventually comes about is that there's too much noise. There's too many people. There's too many offspring. That there is just too much else in the world. Again, these are all happening up here. So you've got the conscious, which is being represented by the male god, and then the mental part, the subconscious, represented by the female god. And then all of the clatter offspring, all of the things that life has produced, that the conscious and the subconscious have gone. And those offspring have a lot of different names. Hatred, judgment, love, joy, shame, all of those things, prejudices. The flood comes about to wipe out all of that and to start over again. So I'm suggesting that is analogous to when we bring it inside, that we start out in life and as we move along, that we create all of these other things as we move along in life that become too raucous for our lives. We want them gone. And they could be bad things. They could just be busy things. They could be unnecessary things. They could just be too much clutter, that we're not living very, just very relaxed, peaceful lives. Any of those things would do. But that flood comes through. Now we've accumulated all of that stuff. What happens? That flood comes through and it just wipes it all out. It's a rebirth story. What do we see if we go to Genesis? It is not God's. It is now Noah. And Noah's an upright man. You're going on this journey, you become Noah. And Noah's family, those become the characteristics of you that are your good characteristics that you want to keep. The world is here. Big analogs. Same thing is going on. They just change the numbers, change the looks of it. It's still the same process. It's still happening up here. Your mind is the world, and it has become full and cluttered with all of those things. And the flood is symbolic of wiping all of that out. They weren't stealing the stories from each other. They weren't improving them. Well, maybe they were improving them. They were putting them in different analogs for their culture. You know, we see this in Jesus's works if we use the same process. If it's all inside of us, if we have to clean the cup, we are the cup. You clean the inside of yourself. If you can't put new wine, a new life into an old wine bottle, your old self, you must first purge yourself. You must have a new wine bottle in order to do that. All of these are analogs teaching the same thing again and again, is to let that stuff go, to heal yourself. And this teaching, it seemed pretty complex in the very first writing, which is puzzling to me. This was pretty deep from early on, and it is nested actually in, the hero's journey. And I suggested that this is elsewhere. You would find this in a myth, for example, when it's time to slay your dragons. Same thing. What are you doing? You're wiping out the stuff that is inside of you. They're your demons. They're your dragons. It's your world you need to clean. All of these are symbolic of self-cleaning. Yeah, rebirth. Rebirth now. Okay, if the story is literal, I can't explain it. You can only say it's supernatural, and the evidence doesn't really exist for it. The evidence that does exist is not evidence. So it had to be supernatural, and you can't explain it. Or it didn't happen at all, and it's worthless. Or, in my case, I look at it and go, wait a minute, I can get something out of that story that allows me to interact with it. It teaches me. It's a step. It teaches me how to heal myself. It is there for a different reason. But that lesson is not, for some reason, people don't want that lesson. That's the one that's there. It's there for the people that want it. I don't treat any of the Bible as literal, even though there are incredible amounts of literal components in it. I think that each teaching block is a teaching block. It is metaphor. It is analog. It is not literal. These things did not really occur. But the places, the names, all of that occurred. It was all written in their time and place. Of course it looks like it fits. It better. No, they wouldn't carry it around if it was about Buddha in Tibet or something. They had to have their own story. It fit with them. Yeah. And they're all doing that. They're all fitting these stories with their people and their time. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Yeah. There are people that treat some of the biblical stories as literal and some not. Some of them are so far-fetched, you go, okay, that can't work. It must be something different. At what point in time is somebody making the decision about what is literal and what is metaphoric? Did the authors of that mix it up like that, or did they nest it all? I think if you use this process and you're a Christian, it should suddenly come online as to why you need to destroy your family members. It's not about your mom and dad. It's about your kin in your head. Yeah, that's it. Well, okay, I nutshelled this. Keep it short and throw it up against the wall and see what sticks. Hope you enjoyed it. Love one another, and I'll see you in the next video.